Hello, and welcome to Unbuilt Giants, a series that looks at the development and demise of some of history's most notable and sometimes bizarre skyscraper projects. The Millennium Tower was a bold and futuristic skyscraper proposal for the heart of the City of London, intended to rise from the site of the bomb-damaged Baltic Exchange at 30 St Mary Axe. Designed by Sir Norman Foster and unveiled in 1996, the tower was planned to stand 386 meters tall, with 92 floors, making it the tallest building in Europe and one of the tallest in the world at the time. With a radical design that abandoned traditional central cores in favor of a dual-core system and continuous floor plates, the structure was envisioned as a symbol of modernity for the new millennium. Despite its ambitious scale, cutting-edge engineering, and support from major financial institutions, the project quickly ran into fierce opposition from heritage bodies, aviation authorities, and public opinion, ultimately leading to its cancellation before construction began. The Baltic Exchange has its roots in the mid-18th century, dating back to 1744, when it began as a forum for shipowners, merchants, and brokers involved in maritime trade. Initially operating informally in coffeehouses around the City of London, it quickly evolved into an essential marketplace for the negotiation of shipping contracts, marine insurance, and freight arrangements. By the 19th century, it had become a cornerstone of global maritime commerce, offering a centralized source of information for international shipping movements and freight rates. As Britain expanded its influence across the seas, the Baltic Exchange's role in facilitating global trade grew in parallel, and it became a vital part of London's burgeoning financial services industry. In response to the increasing scale and formality of its operations, the Baltic Exchange eventually moved into purpose-built premises at 24 to 28 St Mary Axe in the heart of London's financial district. This building, completed in 1903, was designed by the architectural partnership of Smith and Wimble. They produced a striking structure that embodied the Edwardian era's classical grandeur. The facade featured a symmetrical design framed by Corinthian columns and arched windows, presenting an imposing presence on the narrow city street. Inside, the Exchange boasted a vast central atrium, surrounded by galleries and topped with a high, vaulted ceiling, all of which lent it a sense of both formality and ceremony. It was often likened to a cathedral of commerce, reflecting its symbolic and practical importance in the maritime world. Perhaps the most distinctive and celebrated feature of the building was the Baltic Exchange Memorial Glass, a large stained glass dome installed in 1922. Commissioned to honor the memory of the Exchange members who had died during the First World War, the dome was the work of renowned British artist John Dudley Forsyth. Comprising a complex arrangement of stained glass panels, it depicted allegorical scenes representing themes such as sacrifice, duty, and maritime enterprise. Positioned directly above the building's grand staircase, the dome served as both a commemorative monument and a dramatic architectural centerpiece. It was admired not only for its aesthetic qualities, but also for its symbolic resonance with the building's purpose and the community it represented. Despite its heritage and architectural distinction, the Baltic Exchange faced sudden and tragic destruction in the early 1990s. On the morning of the 10th of April 1992, at precisely 9:20 a.m., a one-ton truck bomb planted by the Provisional Irish Republican Army detonated directly outside the building's entrance on St Mary Axe. The blast was one of the most powerful ever seen in peacetime Britain, the largest bomb to explode on British soil since the Second World War. It caused widespread devastation throughout the surrounding area. The explosion claimed the lives of 3 people, injured 91 others, and inflicted catastrophic structural damage to the Baltic Exchange and neighboring buildings. The blast wave shattered windows for several blocks and sent masonry crashing into the narrow streets of the city. The neoclassical facade of the exchange partially collapsed, and the building's internal structure was severely compromised. The once grand trading hall was reduced to rubble, and centuries of institutional memory were abruptly erased in an instant. Yet, amidst the wreckage, the Baltic Exchange memorial glass, surprisingly, remained largely intact. Although several panels were cracked and some sections displaced, the dome had miraculously escaped total destruction. Recognizing its historical and cultural value, heritage professionals and specialists meticulously dismantled the stained glass dome piece by piece. Each panel was carefully catalogued and removed under conservation guidelines before being restored over several years. Today, this extraordinary example of stained glass artistry is preserved and displayed at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, where it continues to serve as a testament to the history and resilience of the Baltic Exchange. In the aftermath of the 1992 bombing, there were genuine hopes that the Baltic Exchange might be saved. The initial response from the exchange's proprietors and from conservation authorities was to preserve and restore the building's historic fabric. At first, these efforts centered on structural assessments and proposals for reconstruction. However, once work began to appraise the true extent of the damage, it quickly became clear that the blast had compromised the building far beyond initial estimate. Not only was the facade torn open, but the internal framework had suffered substantial deformation. Walls had buckled, load-bearing elements were destabilized, and intricate masonry details had either collapsed or been rendered irreparable. The inner structure, once defined by its soaring atrium and elegant glass dome, was now a shell. Dangerous, unstable, and too costly to salvage. The company behind the Baltic Exchange, with limited financial capacity, found itself unable to pursue full restoration. Estimates spiraled, and rebuilding the exchange to its former standard proved economically unviable. Faced with these realities, and after much deliberation, English Heritage, despite its earlier insistence on preservation, granted permission for the exchange to sell the site. In 1995, the land was sold to property development group Trafalgar House, although English Heritage retained legal ownership of the remains of the Grade II listed structure. Their intention was to ensure that any future development would treat the site with historical sensitivity, ideally integrating or commemorating the remnants of the original exchange in a new architectural narrative. Rather than resurrect the past, Trafalgar House looked firmly to the future. On the 10th of September 1996, they unveiled plans for a project that was nothing short of audacious: the Millennium Tower. This proposed skyscraper would soar to 1,296 feet, containing 92 floors and dominating the London skyline. The project was designed to reflect a bold new vision for London's role in the global economy at the dawn of the new millennium. Trafalgar House held a design competition that attracted some of the most respected architectural talent from around the world. Sir Norman Foster, already renowned for his high-tech approach to architecture and his mastery of complex civic structures, secured the commission for his firm, Foster and Partners. His design was selected over concepts from international luminaries such as Jean Nouvel, Kohn Pedersen Fox, or KPF, GMW Partnership, and Sir Michael Hopkins. The winning proposal was groundbreaking in both form and function. Foster's vision for the Millennium Tower discarded traditional skyscraper design principles. Instead of a simple vertical shaft with a central lift core, the building took the shape of two elongated ellipses joined at one end, creating an organic, flowing silhouette. It lacked a tapering structure, retaining its full girth from base to summit a bold move that defied conventional thinking about how tall buildings should visually lighten as they rise. This decision meant that each floor plate would offer a consistent half-acre of usable space, from the lobby to the top. The tower would be supported by two separate vertical cores, which would run the full height of the structure and contain lift shafts for high-speed double-deck elevators, a configuration that improved both spatial efficiency and movement within the building. These dual cores also provided a unique structural solution, enabling the entire superstructure to stand without the need for a central support column. The proposed internal program of the Millennium Tower was equally ambitious. The first 85 floors were allocated for commercial use, offering more than 1.8 million square feet of prime trading and office space, targeted at major banks and multinational corporations. Above this, the upper levels would house a luxury hotel and 40 high-end residential apartments, which would share access to a communal sky garden. Crowned at the top would be a restaurant and a public observation deck, located 1,000 feet above ground, offering panoramic views across the capital. A significant engineering feature of the project was the inclusion of a 600-ton tuned mass damper, a massive counterweight system commonly used in skyscrapers built in earthquake-prone regions. Though London faced no such seismic threats, the damper would help offset wind-induced sway and enhance comfort for occupants at high levels, especially given Britain's often blustery climate. Had it been constructed as originally envisioned, the Millennium Tower would have transformed the London skyline and redrawn the architectural map of Europe, not only becoming the tallest building in the United Kingdom, far surpassing the 235-metre or 770-foot One Canada Square in Canary Wharf, but would also have overtaken the 259-metre or 850-foot Commerzbank Tower in Frankfurt to claim the title of the tallest building in Europe. Globally, it would have ranked as the sixth tallest building at the time, trailing only the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur, the Sears Tower, now the Willis Tower, in Chicago, and the North and South Towers of the original World Trade Center in New York. The Millennium Tower would have stood as a symbol of ambition and technological progress at the threshold of the 21st century. If it had been completed as planned, it would have predated many of the current generation of super-talls. By 2025 standards, it would still rank impressively, sitting as the 54th tallest building in the world between the 387.1-metre 30 Hudson Yards in New York and the 385-metre Public Investment Fund Tower in Riyadh, and would have remained one of the most dominant features on London's skyline. Construction of the tower was scheduled to begin in 1997, with a rapid and ambitious timetable aiming for structural completion by the turn of the millennium in 2000. This would have coincided symbolically with the new era it was intended to usher in, and tenant occupation was expected to begin by mid-2001. Despite its scale and vision, the project quickly became mired in controversy. From the moment plans were revealed to the public, the design and location were met with criticism from both heritage organizations and the media. The Guardian memorably labeled the tower the erotic Gherkin, a nickname that reflected both amusement and discomfort at its unconventional, elongated shape. Although English Heritage initially supported the concept, seeing it as a potential architectural landmark and a suitable successor to the bomb-damaged Baltic Exchange, they remained cautious, aware of the implications for London's protected sightlines and historical character. Opposition spread rapidly, with many objecting not only to the building's extraordinary height, but also to its sheer bulk. Unlike later skyscrapers that narrow as they rise, the Millennium Tower maintained its full footprint from ground to roof, which made its physical presence more imposing and, in the eyes of many, overbearing. The London Planning Advisory Committee rejected the scheme as a whole, describing it as backward-looking and derivative, despite its futuristic structure. Conservationists and local planners expressed deep concerns that the building would dwarf key landmarks, including the iconic dome of St. Paul's Cathedral. The tower was perceived by many not as a modern expression of London's progress, but as a brash intrusion into the delicate architectural balance of the ancient city. Ultimately, the fatal blow came from outside the planning system. The British Airports Authority, or BAA, responsible for operating London's major airports, including Heathrow, strongly objected to the proposed height. The site at 30 St. Mary Axe lay directly beneath the flight paths for Heathrow's west-facing runways 27 left and 27 right. BAA warned that given the frequent poor visibility and foggy weather in central London, a building of such magnitude presented a serious aviation risk. A high-rise structure so close to the final approach could become a navigational hazard, particularly in the event of diversion or pilot error. These concerns made it virtually impossible to proceed without compromising public safety. In light of this decisive opposition, English Heritage withdrew its support for the project and denied permission for the demolition of what remained of the Baltic Exchange. Attempts by Trafalgar House to salvage the scheme by submitting a revised, shorter version of the tower failed to gain sufficient traction. The development stalled, and eventually the site was sold to the reinsurance company Swiss Re. Swiss Re revived the idea of building on the site, but opted for a more restrained design. Once again, Foster and Partners was commissioned to develop the project, and the result was the now celebrated 30 St. Mary Axe. At 180 meters or 591 feet and 41 stories, it was considerably more modest than its predecessor, but retained a bold and innovative form. Completed in December 2003 and opened to the public the following year, the building quickly became one of the most recognizable features of the London skyline. Its energy-efficient design and sleek, rounded profile earned it critical acclaim and the 2003 Emporis Skyscraper Award. The nickname coined during the Millennium Tower's media coverage, the Gherkin, transferred naturally to this new structure and has remained ever since. From the year 2000 onward, central London began to see the early stages of a transformation that would ultimately reshape its skyline. Though the city had long resisted vertical expansion in favor of preserving its low-rise historic character, a slow but steady change in planning attitudes, market demands, and architectural ambition began to make way for taller buildings. In the years that followed, a collection of mid- to high-rise towers began to emerge, each adding new character and complexity to London's once horizontal skyline. Notable additions included the 230-metre-tall Heron Tower, now 110 Bishopsgate, completed in 2011, and the Leadenhall Building, also known as the Cheesegrater, which began construction in 2011 and was completed in 2014. Alongside these, the so-called walkie-talkie at 20 Fenchurch Street took shape, offering a broad, top-heavy form and its own public sky garden. Each project encountered scrutiny, but by the early 2010s, the idea of building upwards in the city had become not only acceptable, but desirable. Driven by limited land availability, the global stature of London's financial services, and shifting aesthetic values in architecture. It was in July 2012 that London entered its true super-tall era with the official opening of the Shard. Located just south of the Thames on the site of the former Southwark Towers near London Bridge Station, the Shard soared to a height of 310 metres. Designed by Renzo Piano, the building redefined the scale and silhouette of London architecture. It combined offices, luxury apartments, a hotel, restaurants, and a public viewing gallery, setting a new precedent for mixed-use vertical development in the capital. Unlike previous tall buildings which often faced fierce opposition, the Shard was largely embraced as a landmark of contemporary London, symbolizing a city increasingly comfortable with vertical ambition. From that moment onward, the skyline changed rapidly. Tall towers with bold, sometimes idiosyncratic designs began to cluster on both sides of the Thames. The planning barriers that once restricted development in the square mile loosened as London embraced a global identity shaped in part by its high-rise architecture. Developers and architects began to explore not just height, but also innovation in form, structure, and sustainability, resulting in buildings such as 22 Bishopsgate, the Scalpel, and plans for future towers that stretch even higher. In this new context, the Millennium Tower appears not as an outlandish anomaly, but as a prescient vision. Conceived in the mid-1990s but never realized, it was a skyscraper far beyond the conventions and constraints of its time. Had it been proposed during the 2010s in a post-Shard landscape where tall buildings were viewed as both commercially viable and architecturally legitimate within the city, the Millennium Tower might well have been approved and built. Its vast scale, advanced structural design, and ambitious integration of mixed-use functions align closely with the principles now embraced in modern London developments. The story of the Millennium Tower is a cautionary tale of ambition colliding with circumstance. Although it never advanced beyond the design stage, its boldness and futuristic vision left an imprint on architectural discourse in London. In a city that would later embrace a new generation of high-rise buildings, including the Shard and the towers of the city cluster, the Millennium Tower might have found its moment in a later decade. Instead, it remains a relic of what might have been, a monument in concept to a skyline that was not yet ready to change. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more episodes coming soon. See you next time.